Hey, it's Jamie and this is Stuff We Play. Guess who's back at it again with the Sonic stuff? The term hidden gem is a phrase that's often thrown around online, but I really do think it applies to 1994's Sonic Triple Trouble for the Sega Game Gear. There are some pretty solid Sonic titles in the Game Gear and I've talked about them all before, but Triple Trouble had the closest size and scope to the bigger Genesis counterparts. Several different villains, a playable Tails, a fantastic soundtrack, actually pretty fun special stages, and some really creative zone themes and gimmicks. That's not to say most of the other Game Gear games are bad, far from it except for the likes of, say, Sonic Blast, but Triple Trouble, in my opinion, was far and away the breakout star of these oft-forgotten games. And I do mean oft-forgotten. Sure, they've been re-released numerous times, most recently via the Game Gear Micro if I remember correctly. But seriously, how often have you actually heard someone say, I think I'm going to play Sonic today, but you know, the weird 8-bit games? Which is kind of a shame, especially in the case of Triple Trouble, because it's a fantastic little title. And clearly I'm not the only one who ever felt that way, as longtime Sonic fan and fangame developer Noah H. Copeland decided to take it upon himself to reimagine this 8-bit platformer and answer the age-old question, what would Sonic Triple Trouble be like if it was a 16-bit Genesis game? You know, like Sonic 1, 2, 3, and Knuckles. That's how we ended up with the creatively titled Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit. I mean, the name works. Now, despite the name, the Genesis-esque art style, and even that nice animation of a Genesis being turned on when you boot up the game, I'd argue that Triple Trouble 16-bit feels more like a follow-up to Sonic Mania than a long-lost Sega Genesis game. And I'd argue that's a good thing. Like in Mania, Sonic has his drop dash ability, which allows him to fall into a spin dash-esque burst forward after a jump. The game is presented in widescreen, and while a lot of the music is definitely replicating that Genesis sound and feel, some tracks, such as Atomic Destroyer Act 2, are more so going for the vibe of classic Sonic than the exact sound, and that's okay. But before I dive into music and such, what's the story here? How does it differ from the original? Because, yeah, while the original game didn't have much to its story, Triple Trouble 16-bit nonetheless changes a few things, just a bit. Instead of taking place sometime vaguely after Sonic 3 and Knuckles, STT-16 starts off literally from the ending of that earlier title. After the Master Emerald is sent back to Angel Island where it belongs, Sonic and Tails head off to do whatever is supposed to come next in this nonsensical timeline. However, a freak storm causes Tails to perform an emergency landing in his plane. Sonic and Tails land on an island, where they find the wreckage of Dr. Robotnik's Death Egg and his Death Egg robot. This, of course, is somehow a trap from Robotnik, who smashes Sonic into the ground and tries to run off with the 7 mystical Chaos Emeralds. At the last second in this intro stage though, 6 of the emeralds disappear, though Robotnik still manages to make off with one of them. From there, Sonic and Tails end up in the first zone of the game, Great Turquoise. Yeah, the entire sequence right there, that wasn't in the original. The act structure is also slightly different here. Instead of most zones being 3 acts, most are instead 2. Instead of being one-to-one recreations of the 8-bit versions, they've all been completely reimagined, though with set pieces and gimmicks retained from the originals. If you've played the original Triple Trouble to death, then you'll both feel at home here and have an entire new game's worth of levels and content to explore. That said, not every zone is the same length, and some zones have different paths depending on who you're playing as, because unlike the original, STT-16 has 3 different playable characters. Well, technically 5, and even then just technically 4, but we'll get to that. The zones here, in order, are the 1-act intro zone, then Great Turquoise, which has 2 acts, Sunset Park, which has 3 acts, Meta Junglera with 2, then the all-new Egg Zeppelin zone with 1, Robotnik Winter with 2 acts, Tidal Plant with 2, and Atomic Destroyer with 3, not to mention a super secret final boss zone that you get at the end if you collect all the Chaos Emeralds. Along the way, Sonic and Tails will encounter not only Dr. Robotnik and his many menacing mechanical contraptions, but also Fang the Sniper, a character referred to as Knack the Weasel depending on the region, and who in the original only appeared in special stages with the exception of one cameo at the end. Here though, he often shows up as an Act 1 boss, and it's pretty cool actually. It also initially seems, like in Sonic 3, that Knuckles the Echidna has been tricked by Dr. Robotnik to help him gather the Chaos Emeralds and be a general nuisance along your adventure. And the original, that was the case. God, look at this red fucking idiot. Triple Trouble 16-bit, in one fell swoop, makes Knuckles much more intelligent seeming and better utilizes one of the original's most disappointing one-off bosses. Yeah, randomly at the the end of the original, there is a fight against Metal Sonic. You know that one guy that everyone loved in Sonic CD and that Sega's pulled out for every single game over the past decade for no other reason. Everyone thought he was cool in Sonic CD. And Knuckles is just randomly captured by Robotnik at the end because why not? For most of this one, Knuckles, quote unquote, as he appears in cutscenes and fights out the game, is actually just Metal Sonic in disguise. And real Knuckles spends the whole adventure captured because he tried to stop Robotnik before Sonic and Tails began their adventure. And this is just so much better. Like, I don't usually care about stories and 2D platformers, but wow, this really is better. What I also really like is the Chaos Emerald system. Like in the original, there are only 6 emeralds you can obtain before the final level. So yes, if you want to play as Super Sonic in regular levels, you can only do that after beating the game. With that in mind, the special stages here are these races against Fang to reach the Chaos Emerald at the end. Avoid obstacles and make sure to collect rings to not ring out. They remind me a bit of the special stages from Sonic Time Twisted, which is another fantastic fan game you should check out if you haven't. Though, I will admit that the hit detection sometimes leaves a bit to be desired. While I did like the mix of Sonic 2's special stages and platforming special stage with exclusive bosses in the original, I do actually appreciate this change here. It means that Fang has more presence in the game proper, and his boss fights are no longer locked to the Chaos Emerald quest, which is nice. And speaking of changes I didn't expect but ended up quite liking, you can't play as Sonic and Tails separately. You have to play as them together, which I know was a source of headache for many in the Genesis games, and many were happy you could play with them separately there, but I swear this works here. Like in Sonic 4 Episode 2, remember that game? You can switch between Sonic and Tails at any time and use both of their abilities to aid in your adventure. So yeah, Sonic can peel out and spin dash at high speeds, but Tails can fly and hoist Sonic up to high places in the process. I didn't think I'd like this at first, but partway through the first act of Great Turquoise, I already felt like this was a small change that was making my adventure feel remarkably fresh. Also, unlike the original, if you reach the end of the game with all of the Chaos Emeralds in tow, so that's the 6 from the special stages plus 1 you get from the final Robotnik fight, you get a true final boss a la Sonic 3. And this, Metal Sonic turns into a form akin to the abomination he became at the end of Sonic Heroes. There's multiple stages of this fight, and you take control of Super Sonic as you pummel the ever-loving shit out of him. It's good fun, with my only real issue being that in my first attempt at fighting him, my game got stuck in this cutscene where he attacks Sonic, Tails, and a recently rescued Knuckles. He just kind of got stuck being pushed off the screen forever, and it's kind of funny in retrospect. Speaking of Knuckles, once you beat the game for the first time, you unlock him. Like in Sonic 3, he can glide and climb walls, and even has an exclusive intro stage, this time based off Angel Island from Sonic 3. He also has some exclusive paths through stages and even some exclusive story beats that firmly place his adventure directly before Sonic and Tails and details how he tried to stop Robotnik and ultimately got captured. His exclusive ending where he does get captured is pretty underwhelming though. I don't know, I expected a little more. He just gets trapped and then we cut to a cut down version of Sonic and Tails ending. There's so much more to STT16 than this though, and this is already a ton of content. There's a free play mode that lets you skip story beats, and after reaching 2 different progression points, you can even unlock Metal Sonic and Fang for this mode. Metal plays basically like a beefier Sonic who can glide and do this electrical attack, but Fang is actually really unique. He can double jump and dispatch enemies using his pop gun. Approaching stages as Fang is really unique and cool and makes up for his lack of story. And even in the lack of story for Metal or Fang means that you can make them fight themselves, which I found pretty amusing. There's also a competition mode, which has a variety of 2-player challenges and even its own dedicated mini-stories for each character. They're presented in a style similar to the Sonic Rivals games on PSP, and if you ever play those, no, it's fine, you aren't missing much. I actually really like competition mode here in concept. There are races and balloon popping challenges, and the dialogue is pretty spot on for a Sonic title. However, competition mode is presented in a different aspect ratio without any background border or anything. I want to say 4:3, but I'm not sure, and that does clash with the rest of the game. Also, no matter what I did, I couldn't get a controller working here, so I hope you and any friends you bring along like keyboard platformer controls. Ugh. This makes competition easily the most disappointing part of the game for me, though it wasn't without its fun. No such issues occurred during the main game modes, aside from the occasional glitch. I've talked a lot about the feel and story, but equally as impressive is how this game looks and sounds. Beyond simply making the 8-bit sprite work of the original look more Genesis-y, STT16 has reimagined these stages with these really nice vibrant tones that both evoke the original and pop wonderfully. Acts often look somewhat different from one another too, which is really nice to see. The character sprite work is top notch as well, and really shines in the cutscenes, such as the ones that transition from one zone to the next. Probably my favorite is the one that goes from the Egg Zeppelin into Robotnik Winter Act 1. In this transition, the ship crashes and you zoom off into the following stage after getting out of a snowdrift. It's really cool. Oh, and can we talk about some of these stage gimmicks? Parts of this game will see you beating up a train, platforming via snowboard, controlling a submarine, and even doing this Mickey Mania inspired pseudo 3D section, which is also in the same stage as that snowboard section now that I think of it. The soundtrack is equally as phenomenal, if not even better. Some of my favorite selections here are Sunset Park Act 3, Meta Junglera Act 2, Robotnik Winter Act 1, and best of all, Atomic Destroyer Act 2. Seriously, this OST is filled with bangers. Okay, honest question. I know in this version of events, Robotnik's Atomic Destroyer is some sort of contrived thing that partially involves creating a fake Chaos Emerald to work, but in my original look I did at Triple Trouble years back, I assumed it was just some sort of atom bomb. Like, it makes sense. Finally, Eggman has gotten fed up with getting his ass kicked by a rodent, so he turned to nukes. I mean, it's right there in the name. Atomic Destroyer. But like, what is it supposed to be here? In Atomic Destroyer Act 2, there's both this cool pseudo 3D section and this beat 'em up-esque elevator segment, which makes it look vaguely Death Star-ish. So is Sonic's world about to be blasted by a space laser? Maybe the real weapon was the metal Sonic we pissed off along the way. But on the whole, STT16 is a game made by fans, released for free, and that, especially for a fan project, has a remarkable amount of polish. I know Noah H. Copeland didn't do it alone. From what I've seen, Overbound Games was also involved here. If you're unfamiliar, they're responsible for Sonic Time Twisted, which I mentioned earlier, reviewed several years back, and which again you should absolutely play. I feel like I'm often way critical of Sonic titles, and maybe that just comes with having been playing these games since I was 3 or 4 years old. But in the case of both these fan projects, I think if you are a fan of classic Sonic, you're missing out by not giving these a shot. Seriously, try them out. I've linked to both their websites in the description. So on that note, that's it for this look at Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit. Between this and Freedom Planet 2, this is turning out to be a pretty good year for classic Sonic-style platformers. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to check out my Patreon page. For as low as $1 a month, Patreon patrons and YouTube channel members get their names here in the credits, exclusive content, and both early videos and early episodes of the Speedrun podcast, along with access to my Discord server. Check it out if you get a chance, but even if you're not interested, I would love for you to like and subscribe. So on that note, thank you very much for watching, stay classy, and I'll see you next time.